Hi everyone, this is Chris Moralia from T4 EdTech, and today we're going to be taking a look at Part 2 from the 2021 school year. So as we look at Part 2, focus will be on instruction. So we're going to be taking a look at what instruction looked like. Now this was in my 8th grade U.S. history classroom, and we'll focus on the instruction from the layout to the instructional design. So the key to this is that focus was on student engagement. If you don't have students engaged and students don't feel like they have any agency in the process, for obvious reasons, they're going to be disconnected from the instruction. It was hard enough to do pandemic instruction as it was with my students. There was major issues with connectivity, and so I had to really scale down what my expectations were at the beginning of the year and really create this idea, this philosophy that less is actually more. I could not overwhelm them with a lot of content. So we're going to take a look at how I might construct a lesson. And my lessons revolved around the California U.S. history frameworks as an 8th grade U.S. history teacher. And what I did is I extracted essential questions, and then I worked backwards. I created assessments. So I used that backwards design that has been made popular over the last 20 years by Jay McTighe. And so I then try to create as much student agency as possible by using choice boards. The platform that I used for instruction, the learning management system, was Canvas. So let's begin. Let's take a look at what everything might look like. First of all, I want to preface this by also saying that I used Eduprotocols. And so when we began instruction, there was a quiz. Now these quizzes were not graded. This is from the Fast and Curious Eduprotocols, and we'll talk more about some of these later. So students, upon entering my classroom, this is what they would see. Now I was doing this pre-pandemic instruction as well. They would come into class, they had their Chromebooks. This would be posted on a projector, but they would also have access to this on a Pear Deck. So you can see I have a do now, I have an essential question. This one we're near the end of the school year, so it's based upon choices and a learning goal. And I tried to give them some type of current events. We didn't have a lot of time to discuss current events at all. The next thing is I'd have a check-in. Now this is extremely important for the social emotional learning. And once again, that idea that students are going to be connected with their teachers, that they need to know that their teachers care. So this was extremely important. So in this case, students would be dragging the icon to how they feel. So this little icon right here, they would drag it to where they would, how they would feel on a particular day. Now this was done once again as we focused on checking in on a Monday or Tuesday because we did we had a block schedule. So the next thing we would do is once they would check in, I also had an attendance question. And the attendance question, was sometimes students selected, they would send me what they would like to have posted. So this once again is just to draw them in, and because this was done virtually, this is where I get to hear their voice. So students had to respond. It's hard enough, my students didn't come on screen, so this is where I could actually have them respond. And so this was a way of me connecting with them. Now, as I said, we would also do what was the Eduprotocols, the integration. And so they would get a question, they would get a series of questions that were on quizzes. And this was embedded into the Pear Deck. So they would click on the link, it would take them to the quizzes. They might have 7 to 10 questions or based upon our unit. And this is building the foundation. Now, typically what would happen is when students would take the quizzes, they would score maybe 40% or higher as a class. But as we kept doing it over and over again, by the in 3 weeks, they would show mastery as a class 70% or better, sometimes even 90% or even better as a class. So that was very impressive. So now we go into, and once again, we're using Pear Deck, the actual instruction. So in this case, students are learning about the daily lives of a slave. And this is what they would have to do here is they would read and they would have to answer a question. And with the Pear Deck, you would see this off. I could see their responses. I could see their progress as they navigated through the Pear Deck slides. Now, once again, this is also allowing for students to work at their own pace because not all students read the same. Not all students are able to process the same way. So this was very powerful, once again, in creating the student agency. These Pear Decks were accessible for the students for the entire unit. So they could go back and finish what they did not complete before. You can see I mix it up too. So in this case, the students are drawing anywhere on the slide. They would take these colors and move it to, or underline the different categories we're looking for, where a slave ad might talk about, a wanted slave ad might talk about the slaves, how they were being described. And so by highlighting, this was very interactive, and I got to see this as well. Now you also see that there is a audio component. So I would put that on the slide as well. So a recording for students who might, let's say, maybe miss the entire day of instruction, they could come back and do this later. And there was, I usually have about a 40-minute instructions about what they needed to do on the slide. So you can see the different types of things we had here. In this case, they're reading about the punishment of a slave, and they have these numbers here. They drag the icons, and basically they're dragging them to the various prompts that are on the bottom of the screen. So it's very interactive. I use this through the entire school year, the Pear Deck. And then typically after they've maybe gone through 1 or 2 slides, done some reading, or in this case might be 3 slides, then the next thing is in the middle of the instruction, I would then ask them to post questions. Now with Pear Deck, I'm seeing these questions as they respond to them. So any questions they might have. So this is very powerful, very, very interactive. That's why Pear Deck is my go-to for instruction delivery. The next process would be, let's say you have students that are moving forward. They're done with these basic questions. I'm giving them choices here. They get to explore what slaves' lives were like, in particular, let's say George Washington's plantation, how women, various women were enslaved, and the male slaves' lives. These are all based upon primary source documents. So they basically, we have a choice board here. They can click on any one of these and go and do some exploration. And the final part, this is a formative piece of assessment, would be at the end of the session, what were slaves' lives like? Now, you notice here it says students can draw anywhere on the slide. So once again, I really want students to express themselves, represent their learning in whatever way they can. Some students would write, some students would draw. So they might draw whatever they came to mind based upon what they read. Now, the last part that I focused on is I did not give any quizzes or tests. So let's say they've gone through this whole entire part about slavery. In this case, this choice board isn't about slavery, but it's about the Civil War. These are choice boards assessments. So I choose an essential questions. I did the same thing for slavery as well. And so not only do they choose the question, they get to choose how they represent the learning. And that can be done in a Flipgrid. It could be done with the Eduprotocols, as I mentioned before. It could be done with a Adobe Spark. A lot of students use the Adobe Sparks. And so this, once again, is building that whole concept of student agency, which is so important. I would do this in the fall, but in this particular year, it was extremely important that students were engaged, that they felt like they had ownership in their learning. So that's all we have for part 2. Part 3, we're going to be talking about favorite apps and platforms. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week.